it's Christina Caudill, and just to let you know, in this upcoming video, we'll be talking about exploring the houses, and we actually have a course coming up on this very topic, which begins Saturday, May 17th. Now, in the video, I refer to it as May 10th. We didn't quite make that start date, so we will be starting on Saturday, May 17th. If you're interested, the link is in the show notes. And so now enjoy the podcast on exploring the houses of the natal chart. Hello, this is Christina Caudill with Radiant Astrology, and in today's episode, we'll be exploring the houses of the natal chart. I have a course coming up with my dear friend Fern Vuchinich from Y Stars Astrology, and I love teaching with her. We make a great team, and we thought that this was such an important topic, whether you're just creating your foundation of your astrology understanding, or if you're an experienced astrologer, an astrologer enthusiast. This is always an important topic to return to. So the houses of the natal chart are something that are really fascinating, and I'm excited to welcome my guest, Fern, back to the podcast. Hi, Fern. How you doing?
Good. How are you, Christina?
I'm good. Fern has returned to my podcast numerous times. And Fern, do you just want to give listeners a quick intro in case they don't know your work, a little bit of background on your work?
Sure. So I've been an astrologer since about 1991, and currently I'm an evolutionary astrologer. I study with Stephen Force, and I'm on the staff at his school providing support for his classes. And I'm also an herbalist, and one of my specialties, and Christina, I did a class on this, is ancestral astrology. So I really like to look at family dynamics in the chart and how those play out through the lineage.
That's awesome. And you know what's so interesting? For about 3 years in a row, we did the astrology of, ancestral astrology during Scorpio season. And this year, I don't know, I just kind of felt the call to do something for Taurus season, the opposite sign, in May. And I thought something that's really important and foundational and that can really give you a sense of that you get more of a grasp of astrology, because the houses are something that people can sometimes feel really frustrating to understand, because you take any two or four astrology books that talk about the houses, and they can give you some different topics in each house. So before we really dive into that, just for those who maybe are not as familiar with natal chart readings, so you see the natal chart, it looks like a pie that's cut up into 12 sections, and each section of that wheel is a house, and the houses govern certain areas of life, right? So it's kind of like the stage in which these planets, if the planets are actors, the stage on which they'll be appearing in your life. And I think the very first thing that's important for people to understand about the houses is that if you think of all the potential that life has to offer, and a lot of the potential maybe you don't even fulfill, right? But it's all the complete potential of your life, different things you may do, different ambitions you may have, then if that you cut that up into 12 sections, right? Each section still could have thousands of possibilities in it, right? But astrologers have tried to distill all of life into 12 sections. And I think that's the important thing to understand, because say if you look at, let's say the first house, which think is the house of the self, is the house of your personal goals, your independence, your personal will. But it can cover even a lot more than that, because we have essentially infinite potential in a lifetime. So anytime you see different astrologers put out their versions of what goes into a house. There's only so much we can even get on like a piece of paper, right? That's why I think we need to be a lot more flexible in our understanding of what the themes of a house are about. So, do you want to add anything to that, Fern?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that we are doing this class in Taurus season because the houses are based on when you were born, the time that you were born. So they're when you entered into life. And Taurus is a sign, it kind of balances out that Scorpio death and transformation because it is the sign that comes in that season of life in the Northern Hemisphere. And it does bring the tangible and the practical really into focus. And that's part of the purpose of the houses. The houses show where in life the planets and the signs show up for you personally. So it's really, to me, the houses are a way to really personalize the movement of the planets and make it very individualized towards you. And so I love it that we are doing this during Taurus season so that we can help people really fully live out their charts in a much more impactful way, I think.
Mm-hmm. And so we're going to be exploring, the 12 houses. And then these are each sort of divvied up into different sections. We have different, quadrants. If you look at them in like sort of four sections, we'll explore sort of how to look at the chart as, a movement through those different sections. And then there's things that have been, the houses themselves. Some may have more of sort of an impact in your life in terms of things that you really see like coming to life for you, and that tends to be the houses with the angles, the angular houses. And so I personally like to spend time exploring what the angles mean because the angles are some of the most sensitive points in the chart. Like if there's a planet natally on any of these angles, if you're having a transit to any of these angles, then like it's incredibly significant. Usually that is like something like majorly is either happening or coming into view. And so, I've even talked to astrologers who didn't really know what angles were because they never spent time really delving into them. I mean, we've heard about, everyone knows the ascendant, right? But there's the ascendant, the descendant, the midheaven, the IC. And for me, those are the things that like really grab my attention. And so I'm excited to be exploring those.
Yeah.
And then we also, before we started this recording this call, I was asking you, Fern, what do you think really frustrates people the most about trying to understand the houses?
Yeah, and we were talking about, sometimes when I teach classes, people have the question of, well, the fifth house is the relationship house, the seventh house is the relationship house, and the eighth house is the relationship house. So, what's the difference between those? And so, we're really going to be spotlighting and highlighting in this course the difference in some of the houses that get confused sometimes.
Mm-hmm. And I was mentioning that I had read in many books that have said that the fourth house is aligned with the mother, and sort of kind of describes the mother or, has to do with like the mother's influence in your life. Of course, we also have the moon as far as planetary, but house-wise, the fourth house is supposed to be the mother and the 10th house is supposed to be the father. However, that's not true for everybody. And I did have a teacher at one point who said that you need to ask your client, just kind of like tease out which is which. Because for some people, say if you had like a stay-at-home mom and she, was really the one to be more nurturing and more fourth housey, then that would be then perhaps that house is aligned with the mother and the 10th house if the father's out in the world, bringing home the bacon. he could be see more 10th house. However, sometimes in the family home, the family dynamic, if the mother is, maybe she's the breadwinner, maybe she's the one who like runs the household and is the authority, quote unquote, in that space of your life, that could be very 10th house because the 10th house is authority. And the fourth house is more about, the cultivation of the inner life, the foundation, the home and family. And so having a more expanded idea, an expanded potential for these. I mean, the worst thing you could do as an astrologer is insist that, no, I read in a book that 10,000 the father, 4,000 the mother, don't argue with me,
Right.
when someone else's reality is actually very different.
Exactly. And like the 12th house, I think, is a house that people have some fear of because it's traditionally seen as sort of a negative house. And in my practice of looking at, thousands of charts, I've seen people live that 12th house in a way that is not, just tragic. There's a lot more going on in the 12th house as the house of spirituality and connection to the divine and compassion. So I think that looking beyond the surface of the houses and kind of, what's in pop astrology and looking more to how do these houses show up in people's lives for real.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think also, it's wonderful that people today, and very also young people, are really exploring traditional astrology, Hellenistic astrology, or even Vedic astrology. But some of those sort of older, traditional terms that they've used to describe these houses, first of all, could have been a different time and like a different, like when women had no rights, if a woman was not meant to be outside of the home. Otherwise, she's a witch or something. And also, there could be some real threats in life that are, at the time maybe different than how we live today. And I think the 12th house is certainly, it can certainly be sorrows and grief and things like that, but it can certainly be a lot more than that, can be, our connection to the world, even beyond anything that we can say control, but it can actually be something that can help, elevate people at times. I mean, I've seen a lot of sun in the 12th house where people are somehow just connect to something greater than themselves, whether that's intentional or not. And I myself experienced Saturn transiting my 12th house. A number of years ago. And while it did bring me a sense of that, yes, I did have a sense of regrets of things that maybe at this, in midlife, I'll never be able to live my entire potential. When you're a child, you think you could do anything, but it actually helped me have a reality check of what is no longer worth pursuing. And in Jungian depth psychology, there's this concept of like the puer and the puella, which is like the forever child, always dreaming about one day I'm going to do this and one day I'm going to do that. But Saturn's the 12th house actually had me be like, you know what? I may never be an astronaut. I may never, win like the Academy Award for Best Picture or something like that. But, all these dreams you have as a child. But what do I want to define myself as? What do I want to commit to, when I do have limited time in front of me? And to me, it was a very soulful experience. It wasn't, knock on wood, fortunately, I didn't find myself, imprisoned or all these things that they say Saturn to the 12th house could be. Um, but it can actually give you a sense that when you have, say, even a transit to this house, to a house coming, and you're just filled with dread and fear of like, oh my God, like the ancients say it's XYZ. Well, maybe we can have a more expanded and modern interpretation of houses. And that first comes from talking to other people. I mean, astrologers get better because they have clients that they talk to that actually help them to understand astrology better. And in a class, when you can share with other people, which I'm hoping we can actually help to cultivate in this course, is that people can share their experiences of how these houses come to life for them.
Absolutely. And that's one thing, a lot of people, clients and friends have been asking me about lately. They're saying, there's so much uncertainty and upheaval happening on a global level, and particularly in the United States. And, astrologers have been talking for years about this time coming with the United States Pluto return and then the Uranus return. And one of the things that the houses can do is they can help you understand, what's your role in this time? Where are these planetary changes and shifts taking place in your life? And that's going to show up in the houses. So I think this is a really timely conversation in class that we're going to have where we're going to help people find their personal place in the more collective kind of shifts that are taking
Mhm.
place.
Yeah, and how I write, like for instance, when I write about astrology in my newsletter or on social media, I usually focus on, the aspects that are happening, like Saturn conjunct Neptune, right? Like that's huge. That's like a massive thing, but it's going to affect people in their personal life differently, obviously, depending on how it activates your natal chart. But very first and foremost, you want to look at the house or houses that it's transiting in. And also, we can look at the houses that those planet rules. We can talk about rulerships as well, because that will also have sort of a resonance in terms of which houses will also be affected. And then when you have more than one houses, you're trying to understand like, okay, so these plants are going through, let's say, my fourth house of home and my and family and roots and foundation and inner self and private life and things like that. But say Saturn rules my first house, right? So the first house of my sense of self and how I show up and engage with the world around me, that also is going to have, and be affected as the ruler of that planet is being impacted by Neptune. So there's ways that we could make it even more, like add more layers to it. So I feel like it's something that we may take for granted. We may think we already know, what each house signifies. But I'll give you an example. Like I recently had, well, not recently, I'd say maybe it was a year and a half or so ago now, I had a solar eclipse right on my IC, like right up to the degree of the bottom of my chart, right? The in the fourth house, my Imunkili, I think I could never pronounce that correctly, but we call it IC. That's one of the angles in the fourth house. And I thought, oh my God, what the heck? Am I going to lose my home? Like what is going to happen? And what was happening at that time was I was getting so, just delving really into my inner self. And I had finally, like, really committed to the power of now, which was really about seeing that we have like ourself and we have this emotional pain body that is always trying to cause us pain. And the more we can realize that, then we can not let that pain body consume us. And it just really clicked. And I swear I was enlightened for like 2 weeks. And that's all that happened. Nothing else big, whatever happened. But I thought, wow, that is so inner self, inner life, a transformation on that level. And even though I'd heard these words before about, yes, the fourth house, it's yeah, your private self and sanctuary, blah, blah, blah. But I actually experienced it and lived it. And that made me realize that, there are so many nuances to the houses that, even though at times we might think, oh, well, nothing happened. I had Uranus through my seventh house and I didn't get divorced, but Uranus is huge, and going through the seventh house is in some way affecting your relationships to others or how other people who come into your life. And it's not always the one thing, the marriage relationship. You know what I'm saying? We tend to just have key words, maybe three or four key words for each house, but they actually merit a lot more depth of understanding.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the seventh house, one thing that I've really become aware of in recent years is that it's not just the house of, as you said, marriage partners or even business partners. For those of us who work with clients, that house can also represent your clients that you're working with. And I've seen people who have a really loaded seventh house be very involved in client work, whether they're therapists, or coaches, but they're part of their reason for being here is to relate to other people in an ongoing way. So yeah, that there's so many different ways that we can perceive the meaning of the houses beyond just the pop astrology version.
Yeah, and one of the things we're talking about too is that one of the first things that I see people get really frustrated with is they freak out if they have empty houses. Like, oh my God, I've looked at my natal chart and I don't have anything in the seventh house. Does that mean I'll never get married? Or I have nothing in the second house. Does that mean I'll never make any money? And the first thing I want to say is no, that doesn't mean that. I think I remember looking at, I want to say it's Oprah's chart. Like, I don't think she has any planets in the second house. And she's like one of the richest women, self-made women in America, in the world, maybe. I don't know. But um, like you can't just say that I have an empty house, so that means nothing will happen in that area of life. I mean, that is just simply not true. Yes, if you do have some houses that maybe are packed with, I would say rather than my personal like opinion is rather than focus on the houses that don't have anything, focus on the houses that do have a lot. So if there you have houses that don't have any planets, then that means there are some houses that may be packed. It may have a stellium of several planets. And so that tends to be an area where there will likely be more activity because of the fact that when other planets are transiting these areas, they will be activated. But what would you like to share, Fern, about empty houses?
Yeah, well, I have a whole video we were talking about that I made a couple of years ago about that because that is one of the most common questions that I get asked about the houses. And so I think we're going to try to share that video as part of the course, you know, intro. And we're going to go into more detail on empty houses in the course itself. So we'll dive deep into that. And I think that's, important for people who are interested in the houses to know that we will be covering that in the course.
Great. And so, just so people know, we plan on launching the course. We're actually starting it on May 10th, 2025. It's not Mercury retrograde, so hopefully we can stick that landing.
Everything's direct
And
now.
yes. So
Yeah.
we've got a 6 week course where um, each Saturday, I think we'll start with both Fern and I to do a welcome, and then we'll sort of switch off each lesson. We'll focus on a house, we'll focus on some main concepts. We'll also have a private online community where you can share what you found. And I think that's one of the most important things is being able to share what areas of life are coming up for you because of things that, whether it's your natal chart, whether it's transits to your chart, that can actually be a learning opportunity for everyone. And I think that's so, so important. So, like I said, it's like so valuable for any astrologer to be talking to actual people to see how these things are coming alive. I mean, yes, it's important when you're in the very early stages to read the books, to take the courses and to go by the word of, experienced astrologers, but no one single astrologer has all of the answers. I think living things, in community with others and learning from them is really the best way to have that understanding, and even to surprise yourselves in some ways of how you may be understanding the houses.
hmm And I think we can do, we'll be doing some troubleshooting in the group if like, I'm having all these relationship problems, but I don't have any planets going through my seventh house. Why is that showing up? So then we'll take a look at the chart and explore that in more detail. Like, well, maybe it's because of this or that. So, yeah.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah.
Yes, there's a lot of other ways that we can, see other people and even like the impact of other people in your life. Like I rarely ever do when I look at relationships for a client. I rarely have to cast another chart. I mean, if I were to do specifically a relationship reading, I would do that. But typically, I only work with one individual just to see how things are coming up in their life. And there's things that we can see in your chart with how, a partner or a relationship is showing up. So yeah, that'll be very fascinating. Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Fern. Thank you so much for collaborating with me again on this. I hope that we can really give a lot of value to people in their understanding of astrology. So for now, go ahead and just sign up for my newsletter at radiantastrology.com. Also, Fern will have information on her newsletter at ystarsastrology.com. I will have those links in our show notes. Is there anything you want to say, Fern, as we wrap up?
I think we covered it. I'm looking forward to teaching this class. I love working with the houses. It's going to be really exciting to share what I've learned over the years with people.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Bye.